Workshop session. Had a good lunch. Good to see you all again. We have a very special treat for you right now. Christine Lewis, who is a cultural worker, a co-founder of Domestic Workers United, my sister friend, who I have known for 2 decades now, someone who I deeply, deeply respect. I was actually going to say, you know, there are people in the movement who are sometimes uplifted and given the spotlight. Christine shines her own spotlight. I was going to say unsung heroine, but she's going to sing, I think. So she will not be an unsung heroine. But I'm very grateful for her presence here today, and also just for all the work she's done over the past 2 decades, organizing domestic workers, bringing poetry and culture and joy and happiness to this movement. And yeah, welcome, Christine.
Thank you, Pramila and team. How is everyone doing? Give me some more uplifting, please. How are you? There you go. Those are the voices we need for the front line, right? Hello, hello. So, as Pramila introduced me just now, I am Christine Lewis, organizer and cultural organizer with Domestic Workers United. And cultural organizer because it's important. Art and activism must segue. Yeah, we need the artists on the front line, right? We are the griots and the prophets. Hello. Listener, you could say hello back to, hello. There you go, there you go. So I'm gonna do a couple of pieces of poem, just to engage you. And please engage me. And let's have an interactive moment, It's not about me, it's about all of us, because we're a community, and it's all of us in this struggle. Not me without you. But will the circle be unbroken in the sweet by and by? So we're going together in all areas of care, in all areas of social reproduction and capitalism against the system. Let me just say, my name is Christine Lewis, and I am an immigrant. Take that in your pipe and smoke it. That's a Trini lingo, right? I help you all with the little lingo over here. I had to break it down some, a little bit, a little Caribbean cadence. Anyhow, this is my story, and this is my song. 2002. Housekeeper, house sitter, au pair, nanny, babysitter, elder caregiver, bottle scrubber, window washer, landscaper, plumber, day laborer, homemaker, living helper, dog walker, companion, custodial engineer, soldier. She's a warrior. She's a warrior, right? Hello. Madre y padre, mother and father, a sister friend, a super sister friend. Yeah, that's who she is. Supermodel look, modern day mommy. Confidant and friend. Dynamic woman. Woman like immortal tree, ageless, stoic. Diva. Invisible woman. Decision maker. Pre-K teacher. Superwoman you ain't. Mary Poppins was fictitious. Juggled 12 bottles standing like decorated soldiers along pearl pink enamel sink, bellies coated with remnants of weekends rancid milk, diapers, A&D, Dr. Leach's how-to, finger paints, Skittles, scones, dustpan, swifter. Did someone say light housekeeping? Ever such a thing? Tantrums, timeout, chronic fatigue syndrome. Stylish McLaren navigates serious sidewalk. Eerie eyes grow out of grate. Probe my existence here. Passerby ask, is that all you could do? Hello, it's Sting too. Tied to remember in long line. Longer than ladder Jacob saw at Food Emporium. Interviews 4 times this week. How many ways to clean poop? Yeah, it's real. Count the ways. Mammogram delayed, thank Thursday. Underscored in Crayola red. Apple picking along the Hudson. PTA put off to serve filet mignon, diced carrots, blue cheese, cream cheese, all kind of cheese in flamboyant rooms. Clear crystal chandeliers hang. Extra dollar seal sliver of galvanized, where star apple sun anoints placid palm blades in colorful calypso air. Ballet, museum mile, movies, maybe the Hamptons, play dates, play space and fate. Bedtime, little engine that could, 5 times tonight. 1955, Mother Goose Nursery, Jim Crow, wasn't a goldfinch who could crow. Destiny of 10 little black boys, and they weren't called black. Hello. Uncertain, their mother's burdened breast, once erect, fall like fertile melons, genuflect earthward, as if pleading before God to have mercy, emptied of its morsel by folks and innocents on plantations at Easy Street, whose fangs of affluence clutch, suck without pity and rejects. Maggots bore holes in consciences, reward with mere pittance, pocket change for a 3rd grader at Trinity. My next poem is a pantoum on the price of migration equals slave labor. Cotton picking days ain't over. Madam List, grow, glow, grow. Lighthouse keeping, walk dog, let baby be first priority. Madam List, grow, glow, grow. Island woman, warm spirit, vex. Let baby be first priority. US dollar controls Manhattan East. Island woman's warm spirit vex. Scoop shit from shitty sidewalk. US dollar controls Manhattan East. Unlike Tobago's tobacco's sunny soil. Scoop shit from shitty sidewalk. Times classified ad, never spell this. Unlike Tobago's tobacco's sunny soil. Work never been this hard. Times classified ad, never spell this. Price of migration means, yes ma'am. Work never been this hard. Baby, unrelated burden, pushed along Avenue Dank. Price of migration means, yes ma'am. Light housekeeping, walk dog, baby, unrelated burden, pushed along Avenue Dank. Cotton picking days ain't over. So in the heights of the COVID pandemic, the Worker Writers School, in collaboration with Pen American World Voices, we produced a coronavirus haiku book. And I'm going to read some of the haikus that I've submitted for the book. In the heights of 2020, which has been really catastrophic, for some of us who have lived through, who have known loss, We have known, we talk about reproductive issue and medical issue, and we've known how many people we have lost who look like me. And it could have been me. It was she too. It was me too. Intubated for 2 weeks, but standing strong to be able to do what I'm doing right now for 32 days at Mercy. So Lord, have mercy on me. Yeah, but it was me. It was my story too. But I've survived to stand and to carry on. And when we get time to stand and carry on, we must carry on. Hello, for who it matters, whom it matters, and community. Cliched as this may sound, it's community, community, community. So I was on the subway in the heights of 2020, before the pandemic. And this woman approached me on the subway, and it was the first. So out of that experience was born this haiku. Broken woman beg, change. Sanitary napkin, a first. Wall Street next. Broken woman beg, change. Sanitary napkin, a first. Wall Street next. Dismal season, then I am reminded, seeds sprout from cracks in concrete. Dismal season, then I am reminded, seeds sprout from cracks in concrete. She navigates folks in mask, subway, madam's room for less than 15. She navigates folks in mask, subway, madam's room for less than 15. Brown woman, warm cold bench, intersection of dreams, a train below groans. Brown women, warm cold bench, intersection of dreams, a train below groans. North Station Plaza, above frigid railroad, 7 a.m., housekeepers huddle, Our Lady of Guadalupe amulet hung from a middle finger. North Station Plaza, above frigid railroad, 7 a.m., housekeepers huddle, Our Lady of Guadalupe amulet hung from middle finger. Contrary days, stress fingers, pen sad notes, lugged 6, slippery treadmill. Contrary days, stress fingers, pen, sad notes. Lugged 6, slippery treadmill. Bangladeshi men deliver tacos, bitter days, Upper East Side. Bangladeshi men deliver tacos, bitter days, Upper East Side. She balanced madam's room, dustpan, dust cloth, less than 50 now, American bread. She balanced madam's room, dustpan, dust cloth, less than 50 now, American bread. Thank you. So because time is of the essence, I want to engage you in a song before I hand it over to the moderator. And I really like this song on the front line. It's one of the songs we do with the artistic component of the Poor People's Campaign with Dr. Barber and Liz Theo Harris at Union Theological Seminary. I went down to the rich man's house, took back what he stole from me. I took back my dignity, took back my humanity. Now, if some of you all know it, I don't want to be the one to sing it, so please sing along with me because it's all about us. And you know, we can make it our own. It could be the governor's house. It could be the border. You know, I'm an immigrant, so I have to remember the border story, not far removed from it. I have to tell that story too. So I went down to the border, took back what he stole from me. I took back my dignity, took back my humanity. Well, I went down to the border and I took back what they stole from me. I took back my dignity, took back my humanity. Well, he's under my feet. Where? Ain't gonna let no system walk all over me. Hey, well, I went down to the governor's house and I took back what she stole from me. I took back my. Well, I went down to the governor's house and I took back what she stole from me. I took back. Well, she's under my feet. Where? Ain't gonna let no system walk all over me.
So let's have another round of applause for Christine Yvette. Thank you, Christine, for grounding us, for helping us remember our collective power and feel it, right? And also remembering the places and spaces through which care lives, right? How it's embodied, how we feel it, how we know it, and what we know through our lived experience, through our collective experience, and again, through our embodied knowledge. So hi, everybody. My name is Ujju Aggarwal. I am glad to be here today. I'll be moderating your this next dialogue, and I'm really, really excited to invite up our next panelists. So please come up and join us, and we will get started. So hi, everyone. Welcome. And thank you again, Christine, for leading us and bringing us back together collectively and feeling and being together collectively in this space fully. My name is Ujju Aggarwal. I am an assistant professor at the New School, and I've also spent a long time working as a community organizer and educator here in New York City. I'm really excited to be here today with our wonderful panelists and want to take a moment to also thank our incredible interpreters. Thank you so much. We're going to We are going to do our best to talk slowly, hold the mics close so we're audible. And if we need to slow down, please signal us. Speak up, okay. So for today's panel, the politics and praxis of care, I'm really, really excited to invite our amazing panelists, Asmaa AbuMezied, Romina Guevarra, Jina Kim, Joyce McMillan, who will be with us but have to leave a little bit early, but we're so glad can join us, and Paula X Rojas. In thinking about today's panel, a central frame of interest to those of us who are organizing the convening was thinking about care from above and below, as we've already been doing today. Thinking about how care is mobilized by dominant power to, as we talked about earlier, regulate, police, exploit, and reproduce the hierarchical group differentiation that is fundamental to racial capitalism. And simultaneously, right, how do we build upon traditions of radical feminists of color, grounded in anti-capitalism, and invoking and creating spaces of collectivity, mutuality, and non-disposability to think about and conceive how we might harness care as a praxis to reconfigure our social relations and work towards more expansive political horizons and social transformation. So what I'd love to begin with is just some brief introductions to hear from our panelists, and maybe we'll begin on the far side with Joyce. Begin by telling us just a little bit about how you locate yourself, how you enter this discussion, and then we'll move on to some other discussions, some other questions, but really thinking about how we enter this question of care from above and below. What does the radical possibility of care and the praxis of care mean? And why are we even, how do we enter this conversation?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joyce McMillan. And everything is always just so simple for me in how I see it. Care from above is those who normally surveillance us. It's about helping to change the narrative and help them to shift their ideology, their understanding of who people are and what it is that people need, so that we can be met where we are in a sensible way, in a reasonable way. And from the other end of the spectrum is just simply having autonomy and the ability to ask for what it is you need and receive it. Because it's not like this country doesn't have an abundance of resources. When I look at the foster care system as an example, they have $3.5 billion to operate in New York City alone. But they will remove a child before they buy cleaning supplies for the parents to clean their home, or laundry detergent, or any of the simple things that doesn't take a lot, right? So I don't think it's really about defining and understanding. I think it's about capitalism and how we fuel it and how we stop it.
So for me, I'm Palestinian, I'm from Gaza, so it's very difficult for me to think about care without the context of where I come from, but also of the ongoing genocide. And that question was very difficult for me to tackle, particularly in the past 6 months, because there is so much narrative that is very alien for me being here, and we have witnessed over the past 6 months is self-care. Like, you need to step away from what you're seeing on the media, because you need to care for yourself so that you can care for others. And that whole narrative is a very rooted in capitalism, and it's completely alien to the narrative that I know of how care is being practiced. But for me to think about what care means and what care from above and below means, I had to look at what the Israeli settler colonialism are attacking and how they are attacking care. And there are two ways in which the current settler colonialism is doing. The first one is really annihilating all care infrastructure in Palestine and Gaza. But the second level is the practice and the tactic of looking at care or manufacturing care as a site of extraction to aim for exhaustion of the Palestinian household and the Palestinian fabric, but also as a site of defeat. Because once you extract, once you exhaust the Palestinian community that is psychologically and socially and economically, then defeat is much easier. And with that comes the notion of the genocide of hope that we are witnessing on a daily basis. To my mother, when I call her when I'm able to call her, for her, hope is a mechanism of survival. But with the different types of death that is being practiced and the different type of killing that is being practiced every single day, it's an attack on hope as a mechanism of survival. And we are seeing how there are different apparatus of the settler colonialism is actually doing something that my colleague Uruba Uthman called the weaponization of hope. And the clear example of the weaponization of hope is through the aid and how humanitarian aid is being delivered in a place like Gaza. The delivery of aid, for example, through the airdrop, is dismantling a very fundamental concept of hope that we practice as Palestinian, which is the connection and the connectiveness with others. Whether it's connection among our own selves within the community, but also connections with other people around us. And this has been something that is manifesting through the displacement and disposition, because you are disconnecting people from the familiarity of the spaces and the places and the people in which they are interacting with, but also by dropping aid from the sky, you are preventing Palestinians from connecting with the doctors who are volunteering to go to Gaza. You are preventing Palestinians from connecting to other people who are witnessing the genocide, but also are like forming a sort of solidarity that is happening. And with that tactic of isolation and separation, technology is being used so much in that sense through like the blackout, the tactics of like, disconnecting communication and blackout. So when we think about how would care look like, and what does it mean, and what are the radical care and practices of care, we need to think about these strategies, and then we need to see how Palestinians on the ground are actually navigating all these spaces and all these tactics of control, psychologically, but also like physically.
Thank you for that. That was incredibly powerful. My name is Jina Kim, and I'm here as a scholar of feminist disability studies, feminist and queer of color critique, and contemporary American lit. And my work is really interested in the role of disability politics and the radical literary imagination in navigating contemporary crises of care, which in my own scholarship, I connect to major US welfare reform or the 1996 Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act. And I approach this work by developing a framework that I call a crip of color critique, which is a kind of intersectional disability framework that is really seeking to multiply solidarity between anti-capitalist, anti-racist, and feminist disability politics. And in particular, I'm looking at the weaponization of disability and dependency by the capitalist state in both its dismantling and administration of systems of state care, right? So I'm thinking about narratives like the welfare queen, right? The allegedly parasitic non-citizen or undocumented immigrant, right? I'm thinking about the disability moocher, right? And how state-authored narratives are presenting these figures as pathologically dependent on state resources, as stealing what does not belong to them, right? And I'm looking to feminist and queer of color literature to make a kind of narrative intervention into these myths of state dependency. The writers that I'm looking at are really seeking to tell different stories about care and dependency, meeting this pathological framework of dependency with an insistence on interdependency, right? So allowing us to see dependency as not an inherently bad or negative thing, right? But allowing us to see how we're all kind of embedded in networks of dependency and care, albeit to different degrees. I'm also looking to literature to see how authors like Octavia Butler, right, Audre Lorde, Leah Lakshmi Piepshna Samarasinghe are beautifully envisioning alternate structures of support, infrastructures of care, insisting that care can look a different way, envisioning care with disabled, racialized, and poor populations at the center. I also really loved that Christine Lewis opened this panel because I saw that song as such an incredible narrative and artistic intervention into this discourse or rhetoric of thievery, right? Where the state positions single mothers, right? Immigrant workers as overly dependent folks that are stealing resources from the state that do not belong to them, right? But as we see in this song, right, the song allows us to see the capitalist state and the boss as in fact the thief, right? And they're stealing land, lives, labor, dignity, and humanity. Yes, and I just found that song to be such a powerful refusal of that discourse of thievery. And this kind of power of poetic intervention is really what I'm trying to locate in my own work. So thank you again, Christine.
Good afternoon, everyone. Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. My name is Anna Guevarra, and I am a professor at UIC, but I am, I've been working on care work and specifically the Philippines and the Philippine labor export economy for quite some time. But I'm actually entering this conversation outside of that scholarship and in pursuit of something else that I've been thinking about as I dream and envision retirement, which I was told will be many, many years from now. So I can dream for a long time, and I think it's okay. So I entered this conversation as an academic worker, and I entered this conversation using the university as a workplace, specifically to think about care work, what it means to be an academic care worker in a university, as I think many of you will be familiar with, a university that is also embedded in neoliberal capitalist modes of hyper-productive modes of being, a university that offers and unfortunately fails to really realize the DEI projects that we all hear about, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also a university that profits from multiculturalism, which we know is embedded in the marketplace. And so I wanted to offer some reflections with regards to that, but also really inspired by the community work that I've been privileged to be part of. I'm very happy to see Damayan in the audience. Yes. Whose work I've been following for many, many years. And it is a shame that I've not been to your office, but hopefully that will change. And inspired by the work of the Filipino Worker Center in Los Angeles, and also a number of organizations in Chicago. So a lot of my, much of my comments will be coming from, really working alongside them, and also being inspired from the lessons of organizing and what that can do, and how we can benefit as academic workers situated in a marketplace of sorts that we have to navigate. And it's an environment that is not for immigrants, for women of color like myself, who do not have the kind of political or social and cultural capital to navigate it, but has been sort of plopped into doing institutional and program building work for many years. So I've served as the founding director of an academic program that has been in formation for 19 years because of many student activists, one of whom is actually in the audience, Bettina Johnson, who is part of that Asian American movement to push for an Asian American Studies program. And after many, many, many years, that program now exists. But as with many ethnic studies, yes, thank you. Yeah. As with many ethnic studies and gender and women's studies programs, that labor comes at a price, and it often takes many years. So we are very fortunate that that is something that exists at UIC. In fact, meant all of the interdisciplinary programs, Black studies, Latin American Latino studies, gender and women's studies, and global Asian studies are all products of student movements. And we are a very proud campus for that. And I think I will share in a few minutes, that work comes with many sacrifices, but also a lot of compromises. And so the question that I want to explore with all of you, with my co-panelists, is a question of how to do this care work in this particular space. I think we often do not think of the university as a site of work, but it is. Yes. And many of us do this work out of a labor of love, but that labor of love comes at a huge price. So, thank you.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Buenas tardes. My name is Paula Rojas, and I'm here, I guess, how I enter this conversation. I'm thinking about what can I contribute to this beautiful mix of brilliant, beautiful panelists that I'm getting to sit with. I guess I come here as a community organizer. That's my background for many years. I'm also a Chilena. I was born in Chile, so thank you for bringing up the struggles of Chile. I think I see the world from how, I was born into a time of a socialist experiment in Chile, the popular unity movement, that after decades of grassroots organization, there was the first democratically elected socialist in the world, Salvador Allende. My family was a part, small town organizers that helped build that. And then we had to leave Chile when the military dictatorship came down, when the coup happened. And so I think I come to this space as someone that saw and knows that we can absolutely transform society. It's absolutely doable. And that then after that horrific clampdown of the dictatorship, what has reemerged in Chile since 2019, I don't know if y'all have been following, is what we are all capable of, right? When you think that they've buried all of us, then wait another 20, 30 years and see what the seeds will bring. So I think I bring that in my life, kind of that long view of organizing in a way that helps me maintain clear, absolute hope that we can do it. if we think about it in those longer stretches. But this question of care from above and care from below, I've been really thinking, thank you, Ujju, for the question. I think, Joyce, what you said, boom, mic drop about the care from above. What it actually is, the care from above is surveillance, policing, and punishment, right? And every single system, not just the formal police system, right? The education system, the healthcare system, I'm in Texas, so what we call child protective services, right? I think here ACS. These are all these systems of surveillance, policing, and punishment from above that are supposedly the systems that care for us. That is absolutely clear. And I think for me as a young organizer, I started as a youth organizer, we were just looking at fighting that care, supposed care from above, right? And thinking that organizing was about how we could build collective people power to challenge that supposed system of care, of surveillance, policing, and punishment. And that by building and building and building and challenging that, we were going to be able to transform society, right? And I think where I come now, 32 years later, I've become a midwife over the years and a parent of a child with special needs. It's a lot of things have shaped my understanding of what it actually means to do the deeper work of social transformation. And I think that that's where this care from below, which I had even no idea to think that we would politicize that, you know, because I was formally trained as a community organizer, where I was taught in this very kind of mathematical way, right? To think about, okay, who's the target? What are the demands? They have the formal power, we have the people power, kind of like a union organizing model. You pull it out of a workplace, you put it in the neighborhood or whatever, right? And you think of it in this very arithmetic way, right? And that's how we do it. We build the power here that gets, the people power gets big enough to challenge, you know, the system power, and that's how we'll win. And after years of kind of trying that over and over in different ways, I was part of an organization called Sister to Sister here in Brooklyn in the 90s. We were doing work around police sexual violence against us. We were young. We were the old ones. We were the 18 to 25-year-olds working with the 12 to 18, 17-year-olds. So and all of us had experienced some form of sexualized state violence, sexual harassment by cops. It's this very kind of subtle thing of they stop you, they ask you for your ID, your number, and you're like, is this like a formal stop, or are they trying to kick it to me, right? That level of violence, sexual violence that happens from that to, straight up physical sexual violence, right? And that whole spectrum, all of us, the young ones and the older ones, had experienced some form of this in our lives, right? So that's the work we were doing for years, and we were targeting our local precinct. We had campaigns, we had demands, we had actions, we had protests, we were building, but eventually we're like, what could they give us? Like what would the win look like here? There's what, to fire this cop or that cop, or to reform this precinct or that, till we hit the wall of understanding that organizing isn't what's going to set us free. And I think, to me, why this conversation is so important is to really think about what it is, another kind of organizing that it's going to take. When I was trained from the old school organizers, when we started to do this other thing that we're like, we're going to stop even targeting the cops. We're going to build an alternative to them. We created a thing called Sisters Liberated Ground, where we're like, we won't call the cops no matter what. We will, and we had slogans and posters and stickers everywhere of like, we turn to each other in any form of conflict or violence. We will not call the police, and we will figure out other ways to deal with it. And we're building these collective projects with self-defense and direct action, et cetera, et cetera. As we're trying to do that, all the organizing kind of organizations that trained us that weren't just white-led, including Center for Third World Organizing, which was, you know, an intersectional community organizing national intermediary that trained organizers all over the country. We're like, what y'all, that's not organizing, you know? That's collective self-help, that's, you know, that's mutual support. That's not organizing. You know, where's the target? Who are the, you know, what are the demands, right? And we were young, but we knew this was organizing, right? We knew this was a different way of doing organizing. And we actually then learned from examples outside of the US, led by women in the global South, right? That organizing can be, it's, to me now, I think about it like taking power organizing is the way that we were taught, that's modeled after union organizing. And I'm not knocking it or saying that we give it up altogether, but then there's another kind of organizing that I call making power organizing, right? And that's where also building collective power, collective people power, we can feel and build the scale, and through creating concrete, not, you know, in our heads or hippie communes, but concrete alternatives to what the supposed care from above gives us. In practice, we are building the power to make deeper transformation, so that ultimately it's not, we're gonna topple the whole thing, but we're actually gonna create cracks, till the whole fucking thing will crumble, I guarantee. So that's the kind, that's why I'm excited about this, you know what I'm saying? Because we're, to me, now I know I was trained as kind of like a macho old school organizer, and that this, that so many have known before me, it took me a long time because I was like that too. I might have been a young woman, but I didn't have kids, I didn't have elders to take care of, I didn't understand that this other practice of the care from below was actually the site, you know, from where we can build this power, and from where power has been built to completely, you know, shut things down. And so I think that's what I'm interested in us talking about more. And then I'm thinking about is dual power. How do we link the taking power organizing with the making power organizing? And then where and how do we use that as another praxis place? So that's what I want to hear a little bit more of people's examples.
So let's give a round of applause to that first round. Thank you, everybody, for introducing us to really grounding ourselves in context, right? That are how we approach these questions are not removed. They're not theoretical questions at all, but they're very much grounded in our context, in our lived conditions, in our material conditions, right? And just as a side note, I neglected to do formal introductions for our amazing panelists. We do have 5 amazing panelists. So please, I want to kind of prioritize our conversation, but you have their bios in the program. I ask you to look them up. Their work and kind of histories of work and grounded practice are incredible, as you will continue to hear. And that's what I'm hoping we can move into hearing a little bit more about now that we've introduced how we entered this conversation, right? Why we're here is hopefully then moving into thinking about then how are we navigating this tension, right? This tension between, again, how care is mobilized by dominant power through mechanisms of regulation, of policing, of exploitation, right? And also then care as a site and a praxis of radical possibility of building, right? How are we navigating that in our work? We've begun to hear a little bit from each of you about how we enter, right? And now hopefully move a little bit deeper into how we navigate these tensions. Because if we had the answers, we wouldn't be here, but hopefully we'll be learning from each other.
I want to first give another round to Paola for the cracks in the system, right? And that's really important to me, because how I've navigated this work is not by people saying Joyce McMillan or JMAC for Families, the organization in which I founded, is doing great work, or I don't base it upon the foundational support we receive. I base it on paying attention to whether or not there are cracks in the system that I am targeting. And the system that I am targeting is the quote unquote child welfare system that I call family policing. And my shirt today says, know your rights, because some cops are called caseworkers. For me, I understand the intersections between everything that everyone up here has spoken about. I understand the intersections of systems and how they impact, but I also understand that systems are not just controlling community members, they are controlling you. Because we like to say what systems are doing, but we always negate to say the part that they have coerced us to do for a paycheck. And yeah, it's true. And so it's not just about us as advocates, community organizers, and what some may call as change makers. It is incumbent upon those who work within system dynamics to also push back, to understand that help isn't help if it doesn't help. Just because you call a thing, don't make it a thing, right? So all these systems claim to help, but if you ask the people who were helped by them, they would say that they were not helped. And that is because we determine what other people need to meet their needs. And that is inappropriate. It's like me saying I'm hungry and you saying I'm a do-gooder, because a lot of people who do this work want to say they're doing God's work. They want to look in the mirror and see a do-gooder. They want to pat themselves on the back and praise themselves and their colleagues because, hey, look, we're extending ourselves. So if I say I'm hungry and one of you say, hey, I'm a do-gooder, I'm going to go buy her dinner. And guess what? I'm going to show how good of a person I am, because I'm going to buy her all seafood. I'm going to buy her shellfish. I'm going to buy her lobster. And I'm going to make sure she has peanut butter in case she runs out of things. She can make a peanut butter sandwich because that'll last. So I'm going to give her the good stuff for now and enough stuff to last her for later, except you forgot to ask me what I'm allergic to, and I can't eat peanuts nor shellfish. So how good was the work that you did? It is not about your intentions. It is about intentionality. So my work is to change narratives, and challenge people who are in the system, who have created these dynamics, these boundaries, these perimeters, and to challenge you. Because we like to say things and have them be empty words, but all of us say, change starts with you, change starts with me. Well, where's the change? What have you changed inside your organization? What have you attempted to change? What have you jumped on the bandwagon to change? How have you supported change? I can't do it alone, but I can tell you that in New York, I definitely started the change that's being made around the family policing system. When I came to this work in 2016, no one was talking about family policing, and no one was concerned about parents having rights, and no one was concerned about anything other than protecting children. And the narrative was that they protect children. But if you pay attention, and I'm talking to people who work in the system, and they're feeling upset because now they're feeling like I'm accusing them of something. I'm not accusing you of anything. Look in the mirror, look at what you did, go back to your notebook, case manager, and you tell me what you did to help, right? It's not about what I think about you, it's about what have you actually done. So at the end of the day, they're saying they protect children, but when you look at the outcome for the children, they're more likely to be homeless, more likely to drop out of high school or be kicked out of high school, more likely to be incarcerated, more likely to have their own children placed in the foster system, more likely to develop a mental health illness, more likely to be homeless on the street. What did you protect them from other than success? But yet, we work in the system or in these many systems that intersect. We surveillance families under, part of my job is to be a mandated reporter, to report them to a system that we know is going to have failing outcomes while feeling good about ourselves for doing our job. It doesn't even make sense. So since I started this work, I do see the cracks in the system. Within 3 years of starting this work, there was major change in New York City. And I can't say I did it alone. Maybe we can say that I was the leader of it, but I had many people join me. So that's why I ask you, if you don't want to be the leader, if you don't want to be the one, how are you jumping on the bandwagon? How are you supporting? Right? Physically, financially, emotionally, whatever it is, how are you supporting? Because people supported me in the change that I was asking for. And the first change that I asked for is there's a thing in New York or across the 50 states, except for Georgia. Georgia is the only state that has abolished it. It's called the State Central Registry. And it's a list, much like the sex offender list, that if you're investigated by a quote unquote child protection service worker, they determine whether or not you go on this list, not a judge, not through a hearing, not through a trial, not through anything. They make the determination. Your child doesn't have to be taken out of the home. You don't have to receive any type of mandated services. It's just simply you was investigated and the person who investigated you said, I think they belong on a list. For however they made that determination. And the being on a list is much like having a felony conviction. It blocks you from housing, jobs, student loans, licensures, and all types of stuff. And the New York Times did an article for me the year that I was pushing for this legislation. And they said that over 50,000 people per year in New York City alone went on the registry. That's not New York State, that's New York City alone. And so when we talk about 50,000 people going on this registry and you stay on there till you're, at that time, you stayed on there until your youngest child turned the age of 28. And if you had a new child, your time on the list started over again. So basically you was on this list for a lifetime. So when we start looking at people living in poverty and we start talking about capitalism, we have to understand that poverty is an industry. And we have to understand how we participate in that industry. So when I push to change it, because we say most families come under the suspicion of child welfare because of their income, I'm like, so why would we sentence a family to poverty if we know that's what's putting children in danger? We do want to protect children, you say, right? So we reduced it, even though I thought it was unconstitutional and should be completely abolished, we were able to reduce it to 8 flat years. Not as far as I want to go, but a hell of a start to take 20 years off the sentence of a person that was never found guilty of anything. Last, I'd like to say 2 last things very quickly because I know there's other panelists and I'm going to have to run. I want to say that the child protection system, as they call it, is the prison industrial complex by a different name. The parallels, both are separated from everyone and everything they know and love. Both have set visit times on set visit days. Both eat what they are served. Both have oversight during the visit. Both change homes and cells regularly. Both use garbage bags or pillowcases to change locations. And they're both paroled back if released from state custody to either their community or to their family members. They both have oversight during the parole period, and they can both be re-separated for any minute infraction without a judge or anything like that. Why would we build a system that we claim is to protect children that is using the blueprint from the prison industrial complex, having the failing outcomes that it has, and still have people defending themselves for working within that system and doing their job. It is not on us. It is on all of us. Thank you.
For the tactics, I want to start again with the context of the current genocide. I think one of the tactics that the Palestinians are using to navigate the power above is, first of all, a rejection and a refusal of the narrative of heroism, resilience, and romanticization. Because that narrative is actually the opposite of care and the opposite of practicing care and practicing solidarity. Because once you portray a population under genocide as heroes and superheroes, you are taking away the suffering. You are actually removing the suffering, and you are putting an extra level of pressure on them to act to the images that you have painted for them. And that's adding another mental load to the state of survival that they are going for. And Palestinians, as part of their practices of rejection of that narrative, was through documentation, through writing about that, documenting that in every single way. And I think Deirdre talked in the morning about that there is no archive of the people who leave. And what the Palestinians in Gaza are currently doing, they are doing writing and documentation as really an act of memory saving, not only for themselves, which is extremely important, utilizing social media platforms to write about it, but also for future generation. Because in the Palestinian experience, our generation from the Nakba from the 1948, their memory has been systematically being removed and being attempt to erase that memory, and therefore playing into your mindset whether you are actually have a connection to the land or not. So by writing, the Palestinians are also talking to future generation of Palestinians that we have not left the land, that this is what we are experiencing. And therefore, when you look to the history, you need to think about the history from our own voices, not from the voices that has been imposed upon us. So that was one angle in which writing has been an act of care to themselves, but also to future generation. The other thing is that the current realization of the importance of writing in languages other than English, which has been the dominant language in writing, because we believe that seeking the West is one way of actually stopping the genocide. But we have realized, and a lot of the emerging young groups are writing in languages that connect them more to the struggles with the global South, writing languages like Urdu and Korean, and languages in Spanish and Portuguese, but also other languages, because we realize it's extremely important that our solidarity and care support does not exist only in the West. Actually, it's fundamental to revive that connection with the global South and the struggles in the global South if we want to continue. But the third act of tactics is an act of refusal toward the, Titi talked in the morning about the benevolence of the state. I would say the act of rejection to the benevolence of donors and aid. Because since the early months of the genocide, the solution that was pushed upon the Palestinians we'll bring more aid. And the Palestinians kept going on media and saying, we don't want aid, we need a ceasefire. Because it doesn't make any sense to give us aid. Aid is not an act of care. It's not act of survival. If you want us to survive, you just own it and stop the genocide. And you can see how there is a community, a practice of a mutual aid and community that has been going everywhere online with GoFundMe campaigns and so on. But also we could see how oppression system have seen this mutual aid as an opportunity to capitalize on it. So when the UNRWA has countries has made a political decision to cut funding to UNRWA, what did the UNRWA do instead of challenging that decision? Fundraise from the people. So you are turning a very unconditional support system through the mutual aid into a conditional fund that is channeled through a global financial system that will dismantle any type of strengthening of the Palestinian care, strengthening of the local organization that will dictate that will support care based on the Palestinian agency of it. And this is not something, and we are seeing also the attack on like how the GoFundMe is being, some of their policies is being changes, but also we are seeing the community push back through hashtags like release the funds. So like this kind of like tension that is happening is an act of how people are navigating the crisis and the annihilation of care systems in a place of like Gaza under genocide. But I think one important thing that I want to stress is how fast and flexible systems of oppression on capitalizing on every aspect of care that is manufactured by communities and how we need to counter that.
So how I enter this conversation is both as a scholar, but also as an academic worker, and I'm being inspired to kind of pivot to thinking about care in the academic workplace, is that, I'm really invested in thinking about how disability politics can help us rethink care. I think disability, helps us see, care and violence as part of the same continuum, right? That they're not necessarily separate entities. On the one hand, disability activists have named care as the very necessary work that we do to ensure the survival of our disabled comrades and communities in a world that insists that disabled lives are not valuable. On the other hand, care has been kind of the language and the framework through which the kind of dumping, shall we say, of disabled people in long-term care facilities, right? In prisons, in hospitals, right? Care has been the language through which the kind of carceral enclosure of disabled people in these so-called care facilities has been justified, right? Care has been used to justify control over disabled lives, right? And so, from the location of disability, we really exercise a critical lens towards the language of care and protection. And we're demanding specificity on what that means, right? Who is being cared for, right? What does care look like, right? And thinking about care from above and below, my colleague has inspired me to think about my own academic workplace. And when I think about care from above, I'm thinking about this kind of branding campaign that my own institution did, Smith College, at the beginning of the pandemic lockdown, which they called a culture of care. But the culture of care came with staff furloughs, right? Non-renewal of contracts, which kicked people out of their jobs. They lost access to health benefits, right? I mean, to be fair, it also came with a year-long subscription to the Calm app. So we did get that, all right. There was also a really strong strand of personal responsibility and self-care, right? So that care then becomes the responsibility of the faculty member, of the student, right? Meanwhile, the kinds of mental health supports available for students on campus are scarce, right? They're not to the level that we need. And so the culture of care as it was envisioned by the institution seemed to me more about care for the endowment. So, I also had a conversation with an administrator about not increasing the takeout rate from the endowment during the lockdown, right? Why are we not increasing the takeout rate to protect and support workers and students, right? And he said, well, increasing the takeout rate is really going to be stealing from the students of the future. And I said, but by not increasing the takeout rate, you're stealing from the students and workers of the present. So these are some examples of care from above. I also feel like I have to mention the many attacks on DEI, on critical race theory, on gender and sexuality studies, which is really demolishing our ability to create a classroom that is a space of care, right, for marginalized students. So that's sort of how I'm dealing with care from above, right? Now, care from below, I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but right now, the Smith Students for Justice in Palestine group is occupying our main administration building and demanding institutional divestment from military profiteering, right? And here we again have care from above and care from below, right? The students have been rightly critical of administrators talking down to them, right? Offering sort of paternalistic forms of care by saying, oh, you don't understand college finances, you're just young people, you don't understand, it's hard to divest, you don't understand that. But I've also heard from the students how energized and fulfilled they've been by the outpouring of support from their fellow classmates, but also from alums, community members, faculty. In the occupation, we've had teach-ins, we've had rallies, we've shared poetry. People have really come out in droves to support this cause, right? And I see that as care from below, right? Taking students seriously as arbiters and visionaries for our future, right? So these are some of the ways in which I'm entering care on the ground, right? And thinking about the tensions that emerge in the space of the university, right, between care from above and care from below.
Thanks so much. In many ways, your university is very similar to my university. I think that question from Ujju is really important. So thank you for having us talk about that. I think one of the things that I remember, someone who's been doing this program building work for over a decade, a colleague who had come to visit the campus, observed and said, well, your job is sort of like driving a bus without wheels up the hill. And I said, yeah, I think that's pretty much characteristic of the work that we are all doing at the university. And she also asked, so how do you keep doing that, right? And I think, as Jina pointed out, the students really are our lifeblood, and it is the fuel that gets our bus up that hill. And I think for many years, we work in a university that says and profits from the notion of student belonging, profits from the notion of being the most racially diverse campus with the largest Pell eligible students. But we realize that that isn't really what students are feeling. Students do not feel that they have a voice. They don't feel that they are partners or even advocates to their lives on campus. And I think we learned early on that as program builders and institution builders, if we want to transform the university, we have to recognize that our students are our partners, and they are actually the strongest advocates for remaking the university. And I think that is one really important strategy that we've cultivated to kind of navigate the tension of what we're hearing as care from above and the kind of care that we really need from below and that comes from below. So that's one. The other is also realizing that there are multiple movements on campus, and that one of the things that the university does really well, or the neoliberal university, is to pit us against one another. And I think the only way to resist that is to realize that our struggles are interconnected with one another. And so as I say that, this is a neoliberal university, it is also a university that has had a long history of activism. We are a campus that has a faculty union. We are a campus that has a really rigorous and visible support for undocumented students. We are a campus that just formed a faculty and staff for justice in Palestine. Yay. Who work alongside students for justice in Palestine. So it is a campus that is facing an enormous amount of scrutiny for the kind of rhetoric that it espouses in terms of diversity, but it is also a campus that fights back. And so I think one of the ways we've been able to do that is through these developing interconnected struggles. But the other is also kind of working from Paula's notion of the cracks. I think we have also learned to identify the cracks, but we also try to fill the cracks with the kind of power and beauty that we see is amongst us, and we're working alongside of it. And the university doesn't know what to do when those cracks are filled with beauty, when those cracks are filled with, kind of resilience that they don't expect. And so I would like to think that the work that we're able to do is to not just knock down and identify and shut down spaces, but to also replace them with the kinds of infrastructure that are quite hard for the university to deal with. And I actually just 2 days ago, there was a rally that Students for Justice in Palestine organized in response to the investiture of our new chancellor, the 10th chancellor of UIC. And outside of that forum, there was one student, and I remember her statement, and I just wanted to uplift that because I think it's a good reminder of what those cracks can be filled with, and the kind of fillers, that's not a good word, that we can, I think, take inspiration from. And this is a student who is a first-year student at UIC, but has already done a lot of work for multiple communities on campus. So she says, and I'll just read from this, and this is directed to our chancellor: "How dare you claim you believe in human rights while simultaneously funding what has been declared as a genocide? How dare you preach diversity and inclusion when you leave your Palestinian students to fend for themselves against a deeply racist campus atmosphere? And it is insulting to throw a party," it was called a Flames Party, "while celebrating your investiture while your students and their allies stand in the cold and rain, begging you to look deep within yourself and find whatever humanity is left in you after watching a genocide in silence." And that last statement really stuck with me, because I think one of the things that has happened in the neoliberal university is the incredible amount of dehumanization that we are made to feel. We are, as academic workers, simply portrayed as cogs in the machine, and our utility is, we become disposable when we are no longer useful for that machine. And I think what this particular student reminds us is the humanity that is what makes what ought to make the university work. And I think that is what she's calling for, and that's what I think we try to remember and honor when we do this work, because driving the bus up the hill isn't, it's not really an easy job. But I think being reminded that we do have these kinds of power, and how to build power from that power, I think is one of the, one of the questions that we're trying to ask, and we're trying to figure out how to navigate.
Thank you all so much. I think I'm trying to think about how to contribute. For me, the thing I wanted to listen more and explore on this, how do we build collective people power from the care from below? Like, what are actual practices of organizing, right, that can build us that sense of collective power that we can grow and grow? Because I know it's possible, and I feel like maybe it feels harder here than in other places in the world in lots of ways, right? So for me, when I was in the sister to sister thing was 1996 to 2004. By 2004, we were feeling this kind of repulsion of having grown into this nonprofit, starting as an all-volunteer organization, and we were part of Insight. I don't know if y'all remember Insight, and we were having what later became the revolution will not be funded conversation of what is happening to us doing this work. We were already not fighting the cops directly, but creating these alternatives to this, right? Building our power in these other ways. But how we were growing that, we did grow a lot, was through the nonprofit industrial complex, right? We figured out how to become a nonprofit, how to raise money, all these things, when before we were just young volunteers running summer programs, right? We turned ourselves into this thing where we became nonprofit administrators, we were organizers, and we had to become nonprofit administrators to keep it going. And there was something very sickening about that. So that happened to us and to others, I think, peers around. I think Ujju and I were both doing organizing back in the early 2000s, in having those critical conversations, right? We want to build more scale. We want to build more power. And yet, what's the vehicle is to get this money and staff ourselves and all that. So that question, and then the other for me was, I got my ass pregnant, sorry, not the first time, but the first time I decided to keep it. And to deal with that, a whole new world opens up of like, what do I have? What is actual work, right? And that I never had to bother with, of being pregnant. I had Medicaid, and the young women that we were working with, some of them had started to get pregnant, and I saw their struggles. But when I went through it, to see the level of surveillance, policing, and punishment in your pregnancy, if those that have private insurance versus those that don't, there's drug testing without your consent, there's all kinds of things that happen that I'm like, other people will not put up with this shit, But yet, in order to keep my Medicaid on, in order to be able to keep getting this care, I have to allow this level of surveillance into my life. That I think really like shifted things for me in a deep way of understanding, right? The more public forms of state violence, the supposed care, right? where now I was seeing this intimate, insidious form of, violence of the systems, but yet it's very isolated, right? We're each in our own little, cubicle being checked and listened to, and we weren't able, it wasn't collectivized at all. And I really had no power I didn't want the resident, I wanted a midwife, they weren't going to give it to me, and so understanding this other place where resistance and power could collectivize, and where the intersection of white supremacy and capitalism, so racial capitalism and heteropatriarchy, are a nasty knot in the medical industrial complex. And I think the disability justice folks have taught us that, right? But I hadn't lived it in my body until that point, is what opened the door to think about, okay, what if we see what Joyce was also saying, for us, we called it the womb to prison pipeline, right? It starts here, and it's literally a pipeline. Before you're even born, some people are being surveilled before they are even born. You know what I'm saying? For real. And also the toxic stress of that pregnant person, the chronic stress that now we can scientifically prove, called allostatic load or weathering, makes those unborn people have less oxygen, less blood than other babies. Before they're born, they have less oxygen, they have less blood. So this womb to prison pipeline starts way before. And so what would it look like to think about organizing from there? Like that organizing from the care from below is what I guess the last 15 years I've been like experimenting and failing many times at attempts. So for us, we tried, and I moved back to Texas. The first thing was a poor and working class mothers of color organization called Mamas of Color Rising, which we built a pretty big organization, all volunteers. No, we didn't want to become a nonprofit or staff. We created a volunteer childcare collective that would kind of support us so that we could even be and start to build from there, start to build power from there, start to both kind of challenge the state and build alternatives. And I think one thing you said this morning, Titi, that really spoke to me was, we were clear, it's not by challenging the state, it's not we can't challenge the capitalist state and think that we're going to change shit, right? We can't. But maybe on a local and municipal level, that's what we attempted, is where it is worth it, we think, to challenge that power of the care from above on a local level, not because if we win there, we're going to transform society, but it creates kind of like a theater in a local community for the horizon of where we're going. How should we do healthcare locally? How should we do housing locally, right? How should we allocate the tax dollars, that's our money, that they're using for other things? And so that is what we've been engaged in since 2014, not as defund police, because we've started taking money from our local police in 2015, but not framing it as defund police, but framing it as building a people's budget for the city, right? So more of what it is that we want, not what we don't want, and creating a people's budget from the ground up in, I don't know, hundreds of community meetings with lots of childcare and lots of diapers and lots of food and lots of rides to build what should our local budget look like? Where should the money go? And from there go push and push to we got $1 million taken out of policing in 2015 into community health, and kind of built to the big uprisings in 2020. I think Austin, Texas was the city that most defunded, the highest percentage of defunding our local police we did there. But as something of organizing with families of what it is that we're trying to build, not even wasting our breath with what we're trying to take down, right? But where do we take the money and where do we put it in? And at the same time say, because the city's not doing what they're fucking supposed to be doing, we are doing this. I think what you were saying, Ashley in the beginning really spoke to me about the GoFundMe. How do we do it in a way where, for us, we started to have cash assistance, food assistance, et cetera, especially when the pandemic hit, but not to let the city off the hook, right? So how do you keep that making power, taking power at the same time? So yes, we did lots of distributions of cash under people's doormat, food, and in every breath saying, because the city is not doing the job that they're supposed to be doing, and because this many millions is going to who knows where, we are doing this for each other for now, but this is our money and we need to get that money for our people. I think that the biggest experiment that I've played with in the last few years, that I wonder if others have, around this tie-up, to me also thinking of kind of an abolitionist, feminist abolitionist practice, is guaranteed income. So we've been able to take millions from our city and give to guaranteed monthly income. We've done maybe 3 rounds of that, of this is what we mean. This would be the kind of making power organizing, right? We don't need them to give rental assistance, food assistance. We don't need the city. We need the money to go directly to people, and that builds up the power and the consciousness of folks of saying, this is our right to have guaranteed income every month, regardless of whether we're formally working or not. And that's kind of where we're at right now, playing around with it.
So I don't know about you all, but I kind of want to sit here all day and keep going in rounds. But I think we have one more possible to go. And I just want to take a moment to kind of think through some of the themes that you all have been raising that are interconnected. I think Joyce, who's not here, but something that she raised that I think is coming up repeatedly that's really significant is this idea of self-determination, right? What does it mean to build spaces for self-determination? How is care a point through which we organize, mobilize, and rebuild our relationships, right? In order to expand our space and capacity for self-determination, right? Not for somebody else to take care of us or to determine what we need, right? From her example, we don't need peanut butter if we're allergic to it, right? But we do need to be able to determine what we need and have the space to do that. And I think that's where also, Paula, what you're talking about in terms of guaranteed income, creating the spaces of childcare, whether it's or expanding the space of not just taking back from the city, but also expanding the space of what do people need to come together, right? To have that space and time to come together, to be self-determined, and to grow that capacity, to grow our collective capacity for that, right? And Asmaa, I feel like you expanded our thinking around that also to then think about, right, this question of memory, right, of relationship building, right, and across kind of notions of value and ability that have been ascribed to us, right, and that what happens if we remake those, right, valuations, not according to the able-bodied person or whatever capitalism describes us as or not, right? And Anna, I think that in terms of the idea of centering humanity, right, where we find those spaces, right, how we expand, right, that real sensibility that we can find in each other, and that we can hope to then amplify and expand. And I think one of the things, Asmaa, that you noted around this kind of fast and quick pace, right, through which capitalism, racial capitalism, imperialism moves into these spaces of self-determination that we create is, I think, our challenge then, right, of how we are talking across maybe spaces, across movements as we're doing here today, and in other places, to grow our capacity to be just as quick and agile, if not more, right? I think one thing that I've been noticing, I appreciated earlier the conversations around education. And one thing that I've been learning here in New York is that, you know, for a long time, Black and Brown organizers have been saying, there's something a little weird about how restorative justice is being picked up as official policy in schools, right? And what we're seeing now in the context of organizing around Palestine is that it is being used as a punitive policy, right? Through which educators, parents, others have to apologize in the formation of a circle, right, for standing up for Palestinian liberation, which is the opposite, of course, of what it's meant to be, but also, again, nothing new if we're paying attention or kind of keeping our ear and eyes on the ground and on each other. So I think the question is also like, how do we then expand that space, right? Not to be absorbed by the logic of care from above, by the logic of regulation, by the logic of policing, but truly for self-determination. And so I guess I just want, I think one of the things that also stuck with me from the morning panel, Dita, you were speaking to this question around kind of expanding the space of the political, right? And so I'm wondering if in closing kind of comments, you all want to talk about how your work around thinking around care, organizing around care as the space of praxis expands how we think about the space of the political, right? As not just in the workplace, for example, as you were speaking about, through forms of parenting and care and teaching and collectivity that you all were talking about, or mutual aid, right? Where those spaces are, what we're learning from them, and what maybe new questions you have that you want to leave us with as things that we need to collectively consider.
One angle that we can look at is really by centering dignity and accountability in so many of the things that we are doing. And I'll just give an example. Even though a lot of the initiatives of mutual aid that is reaching Gaza people to people without any organization in the middle. And they are doing, like, for example, community kitchen to support people with food, particularly in the north of Gaza or even in the south. One thing that is extremely important to note is the influence of culture of NGOs and aid, even in the implementation of an act of care. So for example, you would see all these like community kitchen, the way they take pictures of people that they are providing food for to prove to the people who have donated that money that they are actually doing food delivery is very dehumanizing. It's very like stripping people from their own dignity. So by holding these communities accountable, those people who are doing these initiatives accountable, and by like really putting political consciousness on the importance of centering dignity, particularly in a place in Palestine where like dignity is connected to the land, dignity is connected to resistance. It has so much implication, is one important aspect in which we are really pushing against like the narrative, and we are expanding our concept of what's more. So it's not only about like what do we do, but also how we are doing, the process of doing that. The other angle is like really to review who are we centering in all of our conversations, even when we talk about care. Are we centering those who are have the English language, are able to evacuate because they come from a social economic background? Or are we centering those who are not able, who take a decision that they don't want to evacuate, and what does that mean? So all of that is extremely important when we want to expand our definition of care. And I would add like a very important angle is that when we think about care practices, we are all equipped to like do care practices not in time of genocide, in time of like less annihilated violence. In times of violence, yes, but like not in times of genocide. So we are not equipped for that. And that's why we are struggling in how do we do things. Now, our community are doing things. They are like, for example, families are hosting people who are completely stranger to them, trying to hold this kind of social fabric. But in order for that to continue, we cannot function from a place of lack of resources. Now, what does that resources mean? How do they manifest? There has to be multiple levels of resources. Financial resources is not the only resources that is needed. Psychological resources are needed, but also imaginative resources is extremely important. Because how would you speak about a future if people are unable to think about the future? So I just want to like end with a writing of Rawan, because again, I just want to bring that the importance of reminding us ourselves that in terms of genocide, it's annihilation of life. And again, Titi talked a lot about like life making. And if we need to center what does life making mean in order to think about how can we expand our definition of care in times of genocide. So Rawan, in August 25th, 2023, she gave birth to a baby called Laura. But during the past few months, Rawan have written in her Facebook talking about, I'll read what she said. The house was destroyed over our heads. I didn't know how I grabbed my daughter inside my holding her, and suddenly I was in a blink of an eye under the rubble. I was on the 3rd floor and then under the rubble. I was able to pull myself up, holding her, and like running under all the bombardment that was happening to us. I wished I could open my womb and get her back to where she come from. I was walking and I couldn't see anything in front of me. The only thing is that I wanted to only hold her. I wanted to smell her. I wanted to like just put my head and face with her face. And I wanted to tell her that I wish I didn't bring you to life. So that act of annihilation of life making is extremely important to realize if we want to expand our concepts of care and how that would manifest and what does it mean. So when we think about the future of reconstruction and rebuilding healthcare system, what would it look like? How can we really navigate the control of aid? And it will be controlled by aid, a quasi-government. How do we navigate these spaces where we don't see what Rawan Abu Da'a has told her daughter? And one of the imagination exercises that we are currently doing is how do we build resistant cities? Not resilient city, resistant cities. And that means that we need to reimagine the geography of the place and ensure that it's not dictated upon us in a way that makes us easy to conquer. An example of that is that USAID has funded a lot of infrastructure in Palestine, in the West Bank, in Jenin, and so on. Now, the design of the streets in Jenin, it was very narrow streets from refugee camps. With the USAID, because we want to like center people comfort, the streets became very wide. Now, during the past 6 months, it was easy to conquer Jenin. It was very easy for the Israeli tanks to enter Jenin and like take out all the resistant fighters in Jenin because the streets became designed in a way that makes it easy and very easy for tanks and military jeeps to enter. The same goes for Gaza. In the east of Gaza, where there is a concentration of camps, it's very narrow streets, very difficult to like navigate these streets. In the west of Gaza, where the Shifa hospital is, wide streets, very easy to conquer. And these are all coming from like even how like local governance is designing our cities. So when we think about the future cities, when we think about reconstruction, we have to reimagine and imagine how would we build a resilient, not a resilient cities, how we build cities that would resist all this kind of violence, cities that will also embed care in every aspect of an infrastructure. And by doing that, we are holding those donors accountable, because rebuilding, reconstruction will be happening through donor money. But by designing it the way we see it, we are also holding them accountable for the violence that is embedded on us.
And thank you, Ujju, for bringing us together and for moderating us. Thank you.
Sure. So we are now going to take a 15-minute break, and then we'll be coming back in 15 minutes for our closing keynote. Thank you.